Nicholas Walcott. How accurate have been your mock exams in the past compared to the exam? Pretty good. Pretty good last time. Yeah. So the advantage of doing my course is a lot of people do offer the mock exams. But a lot of people, they only do one, whereas I do two. So having that second mock exam gives you much more coverage. Risk impact mitigation or recommendation. Is it 1 mark or 2 marks? Or 4 marks? It's not 4 marks. Basically, you would get a situation where if you're in the exam, you will have 2 mark per paragraph is what you will go for. 2 mark per paragraph is 2 marks for every well-defined point. So you need to make your point, you need to make an example, and you need to explain your point. So if you can make your point, example, and explain, then you will get the marks, right? So it's actually depth of answer is what you can say. Professional mark skills. No, I'm not going to explain it, but if you can, this is just on the preseen, right? This is not a course, right? If you want to get information on professional mark skills, sign up for my mock revision course, and there is a whole section on how to get professional mark skills in the examination. This is not the purpose of this webinar. This webinar is just to take you through the preseen. Okay, so I'm going to kick off, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to start. So what I would say is, again, once again, it's recorded. If you miss anything, you will be able to pick up the recording after on YouTube. So first of all, it's probably a good idea to scan this. You've got my links on there. All my links are going to be on there in terms of my email address. It's not a support address. The support is a paid service, right? So if you want to sign up for the course, you can please interact with me. But this will have my WhatsApp, my email address, but I do not provide. The support is a paid service, so I cannot provide support via email or WhatsApp for students who have not paid, because that's a paid service, right? But it's got all the there's lots of free stuff. So if you scan this QR code, there's gonna be a lot of free stuff on there, including things that are relevant for your exam. So what I ask you to do is please like and subscribe, and if at the end of this lecture you will be on YouTube. And the upload of this lecture is going to be on YouTube. You should also subscribe to my podcast. So for my podcast, there is 2 podcasts, and there should be more coming, which are very relevant for your exam. So I've just put up a podcast on big data and AI in an Uber. So if you want to get a real advantage for the exam, please like and subscribe to the podcast, because there's one on Uber and there's just another one I've uploaded as well. So there's actually one on ethics. So there's 2 podcasts there. Please like, subscribe, and comment, because these are free services I'm providing. But if you like, subscribe, and comment, it will be your way of paying back. So, yeah, Diana, yes is the answer. I will come back to that in a minute. So I'm just going, this is just the intro. So the only course I've got left, I run courses which are the tuition course, revision course. Basically, those courses are gone now. If you're doing the exam in December, then tuition and revision is something you want to consider. The only course you've got left, which you'll really have to sign up for by Sunday or Monday, because you'll have to do the exam on Tuesday or Wednesday. So what this will be is a more detailed version of the this preseen lecture. It will be much longer. This is a shortened version, a free version, but there's a detailed version which lasts for about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes of the preseen breakdown. There'll be a mock exam based on the preseen, mock 1. You will get that marked, and it will be feedback will be given to you on exam technique. There'll also be a detailed debrief of that. And then on the Friday before the exam, you get mock 2, and there'll be a live session where we discuss and break down mock 2. Mock 2 is not marked, but that course is available right now, but literally it will close in about 2 days' time. So if you want to get more, this is the paid service, yeah. And it will get support as well. So preseen, the most important thing is, I would say, is anything can come up on the preseen examination, right? But most of the stuff will be on the actual day. Most of it will be on the actual day of the exam. So the preseen, everybody who does the exam says the same thing. The preseen is going to be about 5% to 10% of your exam. The majority of stuff on your exam will be on the when you're given on the day, the actual day exhibit. So don't spend hours and hours revising the preseen, because it's kind of a waste of time, because it's going to be on the actual day stuff. Okay, so any topic can come up. So people today, they're going to ask me, Marty, what about this topic? Can it come up? But the answer will always be yes, right? The answer is always yes. What about Porter's diamond? Porter's diamond, could that come up on the exam? Absolutely. Anything can come up. And quite often they put things on there which have got nothing to do with the preseen. So any topic can come in. What about project management? Yeah, anything can come up. Anything can come on the examination. Make sure the job of the preseen is to make sure you know the key features of the industry. You need to read it a few times to make sure you're familiar with it. You won't be referring it much on the day of the exam, so be very familiar with what's in there, because you're only going to be using it for around 5%, 10% on the day of the exam. 90% of the stuff you need will be in the post-scene material. The most important thing is to understand the industry in which the company operates. Don't spend hours. Some people spend 20, 30 hours researching. Okay, so if anybody's going to ask me, can this topic come up? The answer is always going to be yes. So if you ask me anything that's on the syllabus, can this come up? COSO framework, yes, anything can come up. Okay, read my lips, anything can come up in the exam. So if you put a topic up that's on the syllabus and you say, can this come up? I will say yes, right? So anything can come and will come, and really obscure things can come in the exam from the syllabus. So don't spend a lot of time researching the industry. It's not needed. Avoid speculating. Well, we're going to speculate a little bit today. Avoid using the preseen as the main source of material on the day of the exam. You must read the post-scene. The post-scene is where all the important information is. If you've got like 10 hours, practice more questions and revise the syllabus is my advice. Don't spend 10 hours trying to anticipate what the preseen is all about. Exams 3 hours 15. I think you know this now. 4 to 5 exhibits, 3 tasks, professional skills marks, test reach response area will be for each question. So I think you're pretty familiar with it. And one thing you need to work on is your professional marks. So for your professional marks, it's going to be a key element of your examination. So a lot of people neglect professional marks in the exam, but professional marks, a lot of people who fail, they don't get very good professional marks. So please understand, if you look at my YouTube, there's a whole thing about it on my YouTube channel, which is an interview with the ACCA SBL examiner. And that goes into a little bit about professional marks and how professional marks are given in the examination. So if you've got time, go to my YouTube channel and read my interview with the ACCA examiner. So that's the person who is setting your examination. Okay, so let me just get up the preseen. Let me get this up. Can you see this okay? Can you just give me the thumbs up that you can see the preseen material? Yeah, okay, so let me go through. Just give me a second, I'm just going to move my camera over. Okay, so this is going to be the preseen material for you. Hold on. Let me just close this down. Hold on. Stop presenting. Let me just do a screen share again. Can you see the pre-seen material now? Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see the pre-seen material? Yeah. Okay. So you need to read this a few times, so I'm just going to go through it. So the first thing, this is really about a business which is something like Uber or Grab. So in this business, what you've got is, the first thing is, when you've got this business, it's based on technology, and there is going to be a loss of control over the drivers, right? So you don't directly control the drivers, so that creates a risk. When you don't have direct control over the drivers, there's going to be a risk in the examination. So for this risk, you've got to take into account that risk management might be a factor in your examination. There's lots of potential risks, not just the driver risk, but there's also a risk in terms of technology. There's also going to be a technology risk in the examination, a risk in terms of technology. So risk management may be a likely question in your examination. Now, when I read this question, it indicated to me there may be a question, and they're talking about the other elements and the competition. So when I read this part of the case, I was thinking, wow, they might be asking here, they may ask about things like the competitive environment. Not really asked anything on competitive environment for a long time. So if they ask about competitive environment, which model will you use in the exam? If they ask about competitive environment, which model will you use in the exam? Competitive environment, which model? If they ask about competitive environment, which model are you going to use in the examination? Yeah, you're going to use Porter's 5 forces. So can you tell me, in terms of Porter's 5 forces, what are the threat of new entrants in this industry? What are the threat of new entrants in this industry going to be? Threat of new entrants in this industry, is it going to be high or low? So everybody's saying high, 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 high. I think you're all wrong. So I think in this industry, whenever you look at threat of new entrants, you always look at the barriers to entry. So in this industry, it's not like a hawker stall or a sandwich shop. There are significant barriers to entry in this industry, such as technology. It's a major barrier to entry. It's very expensive to set up these type of systems they've got in the organization. Things like going into driverless cars is extremely expensive. It's got high capital setup cost. It's got strong brands. So the barriers are high. So when the barriers are high, the threat of new entrants is going to be low. The threat of new entrants is going to be low. Even though they don't own their own cars, the actual technology is really expensive to build it well. If you can have driverless cars, this is a very expensive setup cost in the business. So the barriers to entry are going to be, I think, quite high. Strong brands, brand loyalty exists in the market. Economies of scale exist in the market. Where the barriers are high, the threat of new entrants are going to be low. So it's not an easy market to enter, right? It requires quite a lot of capital, setup costs, requires a lot of expertise and specialist knowledge there. So you may get asked something about the 5 forces, so make sure you prepare the Porter's 5 forces. The other thing I thought about here for environmental is they're going to ask about, maybe there's a lot of things about pestel factors. You've got a lot of political. It's very much affected by the economy. Social factors are kind of an important factor in terms of adoption of the technology, and legal factors massive in this market. So you've got a couple of questions there which might come up in terms of pestel and 5 forces. competitive rivalry, high competitive rivalry in the market, lots of competition in the market. Existing companies are Zenbi is the main competitor, and again, one barrier is economies of scale. So economies of scale, the bigger you are, and Zenbi is in overseas markets, right? So they're more of a global company, whereas Beago is only operating in one country in B-land. So possible issues there about if they're going to grow this business, do they need to expand overseas? So that could be something that they look at in the examination, overseas expansion into another country. Is that a way to grow the business going forward once the current market has reached saturation point? There's no sort of standard operating license. Each city has its own license. There's quite a lot of complexity in terms of compliance costs, regulatory costs. Getting licenses is quite costly for the organization, and there's different criteria and no standardization in this business. What I saw here is it's a strong growth. They're growing very quickly, but there's 75% of people who are not active users of the app. So there's still quite a lot of growth potential to get more people to use that app. So they may be asking you in the exam, how can we get more people? What marketing strategies could we use to get more people using the app going forward? Okay, so in terms of competitive rivalry in the market, we can see Zenbi is declining and Beago is growing. Now, one thing that happened in Asia, so I used to live in Singapore, there was two companies. One was called Grab and one was called Uber. So Grab and Uber, high competitive rivalry situation. They were fighting each other, which tends to drive down prices and profit margins. What they did in Asia was Grab acquired Uber. So it could be a question in the examination. There could be a question in relation to acquisition, right? So it could be Beago by Zenbi. I mean, Beago by Zenbi, it's going to be a massive cost to buy them, but maybe Zenbi could buy Beago. So a merger question. If you get asked to evaluate a merger, which model will you use in the examination? You tell me. If you're asked to evaluate the merger, which model are you going to use in the exam? Evaluate the merger of Zenbi and Beago. Which model are you going to use? Yeah, so this is going to be your suitability, acceptability, feasibility. Yeah, suitability, acceptability, feasibility. So evaluation, quite popular. Something like that could be coming up. You've been made an offer to acquire your business. Do you accept the offer or reject? Evaluate whether the merger is the right strategy for you. So they might give you some financials as well in there. So suitability, acceptability. If anybody asks me, can this subject be tested? What will my answer be, Rahul? The answer is, of course, yes. So can it be tested? Please don't ask me, can this topic be tested? Because the answer is yes, right? If it's diamond, they might give you a lot of information in the post scene about the country, and they're going to ask you things in relation to the country. But it's not in the pre-scene at all. It's a typical question for SBL where they put things in the post scene, which is not at all in the pre-scene, and they might ask about diamond in the exam. Okay, so I'm just going to put this back here. Sorry. There we go. So what can we talk about here, ladies and gentlemen? There's a lot of focus on, they started off with ride sharing, so there's a lot of mention in the case about environmentally friendly business. They talk about the environment quite a lot in the business. So I just thought, because they keep mentioning the environment, then the idea of CSR, corporate social responsibility, is a good question in the examination, corporate social responsibility. And I think this one might lend itself quite well to a question on integrated reporting. Integrated reporting, transparency, corporate social responsibility strategy could be a good one that they would ask about in the exam. It's been quite popular in the past. Ride hailing basically is what their core business is now. That's where all their money is. Just to give you some background, taxi companies hate Uber, right? So, taxi companies are going to hate Uber. So you've got to bear in mind that there's a lot of competition and there's been lots of issues. Again, I would advise you to listen to my podcast to find out about all the nasty things that Uber did to deal with the taxi companies. So there's lots of regulation, and a lot of taxi drivers don't like Uber at all. And, there's been some countries where they set the Uber on fire and beat up the drivers. And if you go to Bali, you cannot get an Uber. You cannot get an Uber because they're too scared to pick you up sometimes. So there are a lot of factors going on there. Micromobility, again, they mentioned environment. They keep on mentioning this word environmentally friendly, environmentally. So whenever they keep mentioning it, that might indicate there's going to be something that comes up in the examination in relation to the environment. So again, integrated reporting, CSR strategy, benefits of integrated reporting will come in the exam. They're trying to develop this integrated transportation system. They're trying to develop that going forward. So this integrated transport is kind of, again, very environmentally friendly. You get off a train and you get on a bike. So it's kind of integrating in the system. So that's a good thing. Car rental is like a partnership model. They're going for something slightly different here. Car rental is like a partnership model. Car rental is like a partnership model. So a slightly different model, but again, still a source of revenue, not very popular at the moment. Business services is a bit of a weird business for them because their business is not about having cars, right? But with business services, they're going to have to maintain stock of buses or something. It's going to have high maintenance costs. It seems to be like going against their core principle of their business. So that's kind of a weird one, but it's not really popular at the moment and it's not growing. There's a lot of data on the app. There are a lot of data on the app, and I just think because of this data, we don't know to what extent, but in the past, big data and AI has been quite a popular area. Big data and AI is going to be quite a popular area. So there could be a question in terms of how are they going to use big data in the examination? How are they going to use big data? What are the different ways in which they're going to use big data in the examination? I also think about all this data they've got. It opens up to a privacy risk, hacking risk. So it opens up a question in terms of cyber security. So make sure you know all your cyber security controls. Make sure you know all your cyber security controls, because you're holding a lot of data about customers' credit cards. You're holding data about their name, address, credit card. They've got a lot of data there, which is very valuable to a hacker. Just make sure that you are fully aware of all the different ways of hacking, protection against hacking going forward. So the drivers, there is some controls over the drivers, but even if you've got controls, Uber have found that even if you've got certain controls in place, you can still have risk of problems with your drivers, right? So it's not a perfect system. There are background checks. So just a couple of questions here. 6 capitals. Would you include drivers as part of human? Well, I think it's probably not a bad idea to do that. Contractors for you, I think you can maybe include it in terms of driver turnover. Might be important for you to include that, even though they're not employed in the organization, they are a connected business. So I think transparency is important, right? So I think you could include drivers on there. I don't think it's wrong to include drivers, even though they're not really officially employed by you. It would provide transparency for people in the organization. You can mention drivers are not employees, but they're an important part of the business. So I think if I was a shareholder or stakeholder in this business, I'd want to know about driver turnover. Driver retention would be a key thing in terms of human capital that I would like to know about, even though they're not directly controlled. They are an important stakeholder in the business. So they're going to rely on the third-party expert, apparently, for this. So whenever you rely on third party, maybe that third party is not doing a very good job. Creates a question about risk management, risk procedures, right? So there's lots of risks in this business because we don't directly control the employees. They're not directly working for us. They should have the car should reach minimum standards, but they will lease. So again, if they're leasing cars, then that's quite again, they're going to be holding capital. They're going to have those costs of buying the cars and leasing them. So it creates a different type of business away from this just pure app usage. Now, again, if you listen to my podcast about Uber, there's lots of issues in countries where in America, Uber took them to court and saying, actually, we are employees and we want holiday pay and things like that. So there are some pushbacks on treating these drivers as purely contractors, right? There are some pushbacks on that. So again, listen to my podcast about Uber, and you will see that being discussed as an issue. So there are some pushbacks from the drivers, like a lot of drivers want to be members of a union. But right now they're using students and retired people, part-time workers, so a lot of part-time people working on that. In terms of this diagram, the one I picked up here is we've got kind of good information on driver rating. Later on, it talks about the fact that the drivers it's difficult to retain the drivers. So I think good information is a source we can use in terms of retaining the good drivers, maybe changing the motivation and incentive schemes for drivers. We want to kind of reward the good drivers and try and retain them in our business. So we've got this information on driver scores. It could be an important way to retain them in our company. Again, a lot of Pestel stuff is pretty important here, right? Your political, economic, social, technology. If they ask about Pestel, you've got a lot of Pestel factors in the environment. You've got a lot of Pestel factors. Economic, you've got political factors, you've got social factors. So fuel price is a big factor. It's going to have an impact on the business. Fuel price, yeah. So we've got a lot of information on Pestel. And they put here, the business depends on attracting and retaining drivers. So again, this links back to what I said here. We want to try and keep the good drivers. So they might ask you about ways, how can we, what I talked about it as being is, it's kind of like a weird kind of talent management. So there's a big thing on your syllabus about how to retain talent, how to attract talent, and how to retain talent. Now, that's normally for employees, right? So talent management is normally something you're going to do for your employees about creating career paths. But here, we've kind of got, you want to keep the talented drivers. So they might ask you about how can we keep the good drivers? What actions can we take to keep the good drivers in our business? So we need to get drivers, we need to retain drivers, and we need to make sure we get new drivers. So how do we get new drivers? How do we attract drivers? So talent management's about attracting and retaining staff. Maybe we could take some of those ideas on talent management. And although they're not our full-time employees, we can maybe take some of those ideas and apply them in the business. Yeah, so I put here talent management. Important for drivers to get, we need volume, right? This is a business which is about volume, right? So as a driver, you want to be busy. because busy means you're making money. As a company, you need volume because you're only making 10 to 15% margin. So you need a lot. If it's a $10 fare, you're making $1. So you need volume. So this business needs growth. This business needs volumes to make money. And one thing to realize is that companies like Uber, they didn't make a profit for years, right? They didn't make any profit for years at all, right? So they never really made any profit, and they've only kind of recently started to make a profit. So a lot of these companies, in the short term, they don't make a profit. So you've got to think about that's kind of a characteristic of the industry, and the shareholders buy it because they think in the medium term they're going to start making profits. So Uber, for many, many years, they never ever made a profit. So that's one thing you've got to consider as a characteristic of the industry. Lots of competitive rivalry, lots of substitutes like public transport, lots of risks. Yeah, so lots of risks in there. Diana, there's going to be a lot of risks in the market. So whenever we talk about risks, right, safety risks, there's been unauthorized credit card risk. There's been sharing of account details, right? There's legal risk. So it kind of opens up a question. One of the examiner's favorite questions in the exam is where they will give you a list of risks, and they'll ask you about assess the risk. You want to assess the risk. And if the question asks you to assess the risk, what do you talk about? Assess the risk. What do you talk about if the question says assess the risk? Explain the risk is the wrong answer, Diana. Assess the risk. Assess the risk. What is... Investigate is the wrong answer, Nicholas. No, shit, that's the wrong answer. Yeah, so assess the risk is looking at what I call the RIP. The RIP. So assess the risk is risk, impact, probability, right? Risk, impact, and probability for the risk. So if you assess the risk, you look at the risk, impact, and probability. So they've given you a lot of risks in the case, but what they might ask you in the post scene is, okay, these are the risks, but please assess the risks. Assess them, not identify, not describe, but assess. Assess means it's a way to prioritize the risk. Assess is the way to prioritize the risk. And in particular, the risks we're going to look at is the risks. Remember, RIP, risk, impact, yeah, like a heat map. We're looking at those high impact, high probability risks, right? And then based on the risk assessment, we then go for risk mitigation. So in the case, you cannot draw a heat map in the exam. You cannot draw a heat map in the exam. So because there's no way to draw it. So I don't think it did come up on a really old exam paper, where it was like a paper-based exam, but you can't draw a heat map. But they might be asking about risk assessment and risk mitigation. Your TARA strategies. Yeah, Rahul, that's right. Yeah. For talent management, I don't know. I mean, look, first of all, I don't know what's coming up in the exam. If I knew what was coming up, I'd just tell you. I can just give you ideas, right? I can just give you ideas of things that might come up, right? These are things that might come up. For talent management, they might ask, how do we retain talent? How do we attract talent? Give ideas how to retain and attract talent, right? It's not going to be quite, you're going to have to adapt it. It's not quite standardized talent management, because standardized talent management is all about creating the career path in the company. But there may be other things you can talk about. So you have to be a little bit creative. Increased government regulation. Again, it's a risk. The environmental risk, part of a Pestel question, is also a risk for the company. The drivers may have to pay this. So in London, there's a clean air zone. So you've got to pay a daily fee to drive into the clean air zone, or you've got to have a car that's of the right specification. So it's going to impact drivers and driver profitability, which means if the drivers are not making money, they're not going to come out for you. Now, big thing here in terms of strategy, right? So there's a big section on your syllabus called strategy. So for strategy, there is things like what's the next strategy for the company? So most companies like in Singapore, Grab, and I'm sure you're familiar with Uber Eats, they treat the app like a platform. CSA's Clean Air Zone is just above a Clean Air Zone. Food delivery is Uber Eats. I'm sure you're familiar with it. They're not doing it at the moment. So there could be a suitability, acceptability, feasibility question in terms of should we go into the food delivery business? What are the issues? What are the problems? What are the risks? What is it a good strategy for the company? There's autonomous driverless cars, which is something Uber is invested in. This is like a massively expensive cost, right? But a lot of their business is in development. If you look at later on, we see it. A lot of their business is in development. So there's something, again, should we go into driverless cars? What are the risks? I did see one in California last week, a driverless car. Lots of risks involved. What are the risks? How do we manage the risks? A lot of those driverless cars have crashed and have killed people. Right? So, electronic vehicles, yeah. So this company seems to be a lot about the environment, right? So they might ask you a question about something about EVs, like should we make all drivers have an electronic car? What are the issues in relation to that? What are the problems, issues? KPIs are pretty standard. Somebody asked me the other day, why is there only one financial KPI? Why is there only one financial KPI? Well, because like the nature of this business is it's all about revenue rather than profit in the short term, right? So all these KPIs are pretty standardized. I think they're pretty easy to understand. Profitability is something that for these models, they generally come later. So you wouldn't be expecting to make big profits in the short term. It's something that may become 4 to 5 years down the line. Net Promoter Score is how much are people recommending your products. How much are people recommending your products? Okay, regulation, there could be more regulation in the future. Trade union is an issue possibly in the examination. So should we allow a trade union or driver network in Beago? Should you allow a trade union or driver network? What are the benefits of doing so? What are the risks of doing so in the exam? So again, they talk about rideshare is where the Beago started off, and that was the very environmentally friendly business. They're basically growing very fast. They've got 19 million customers is the forecast. But remember, there's 75% of people are not using the app. So there's still kind of a lot of growth left in the market. The way to grow the business is to get more people to use the app, which is a market penetration strategy, but also offer new products, product development, new products to the same customers. You tell me, Minkula, you tell me what the problems of the EV are. Why don't you tell me? So if you're a taxi driver, do you want to use an EV? What are the problems? You tell me. Right? So Beago, yeah, it's growing. Now, they are a listed company on the stock market, so there will be pressure for growth in the future, right? There will be pressure for growth and profits, right? So they need to get additional revenue sources to satisfy the institutional investors. Yeah, so for your EV cars, is it good for a taxi driver? Well, the problem with the EV car is you've got to plug it in, right? So when you plug it in, what you're doing? Well, you're not driving, right? So that's kind of one simple thing that you can talk about. So, so basically the majority of their business is in in two sectors. This business services is like very small. I think if they want to grow this business, they've got to move into new products or new services. New products or new services going forward, right? So that's what all the companies have done. The Ubers and the Grabs, they've offered additional services. So for example, in Singapore, Grab offers banking, theatre tickets, it's got an online money, it's used for delivery, it's used for lots of different factors, right? You can buy holiday insurance, you can buy flights. So the more people you can get to use the app for more services, it's a really good way to grow the business, because you're always going to take those 5%, 10% commissions. So if you sell insurance, you're going to get your 10% commissions. So the strategy for Uber and Grab has always been to grow the product offering. So there could be something on that in your exam about strategies to grow the business and what could you do, and that look at what Grab is doing, look at what Uber are doing in terms of their strategy and their product development. So it just tells you about their businesses. The one that's not really successful, is very small at the moment, is where they're going to have their own transportation. Airport, hotel, transportation seems quite small at the moment. Technology, again, when I see this technology, two things come to mind. One is how to use the technology by using big data and AI, but also how to protect that technology in the market. How are we going to protect that technology? You've got your data security issues. How are we going to protect that technology in the market? So also privacy. In many countries now, there's privacy. If you break the privacy data, there's major fines going to happen in your business. So I see a lot of things like big data, maybe it's something they might ask about using AI. Yes, lots of threats for technology. If the system crashes, if there's a hacker attack, malicious code, then you can't run your business. So there's lots of technology risks. So make sure you're very familiar with how to protect technology risks. Marketing, they seem to be doing a lot of marketing already. So normally in the case, they give you marketing, they're not doing much marketing, and you're thought, no, okay, if they're not doing much marketing, there's going to be a question about e-marketing. But in this case, they're doing quite a lot of marketing already. There could be a question about 75% of people are not active users. How marketing strategies to make customers to become more active users going forward. So what are the marketing strategies we can use to create more active users? High number of research. There's a lot of people in R&D in this business, which might suggest they are going to go potentially into the driverless car business. That's kind of a risk for the company, and like nobody's managed to do it yet. Even like I think in China just about is prototyping, but it's a massive investment, a huge investment, and only like the absolute biggest companies will be able to do that. I doubt this company in one would be able to do it, but this is the ACCA, so anything is possible in the examination, right? There's no gaps. Okay. What I mean by no gaps is they've got technology covered, they've got commercial covered, they've got HR covered, they've got marketing covered. There's no like gaps. But when you're reading the preseen case study, what you should think about, is what is missing? What information don't we have? Okay, what information don't we have in the organization? So we don't know who they are, we don't know where they're from, we don't know if they're all family members, we don't know whether they've got diversity, we don't know their background. 6 NEDs looks good, but they might all be brothers and sisters of the current board. We don't know, right? We don't know who they are. So sometimes if you just look at it, there is no particular issues, right? They could be, they could be independent direct. There could be NEDs who are not independent, right? So when you look at the case, if it's something about this board, it will be in the post scene, right? So they might say all these people are all men, right? There's no ethnic minority representation on the board. There's they're all from the same background. There's no board diversity. So it will come later, right? So when you read the preseen, some students, they go, oh, well, that's definitely going to come. Like last exam, there was no NEDs on the board. And everybody's going, oh, there's definitely going to be a question about NEDs. But there's a very good reason why there was no NEDs on the board. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, definitely going to be corporate governance. And it never came up. So don't look for what's there. Look for what is not there is a good skill when you're looking at this preseen. What information don't we have? What information is missing? Yeah, so we've got risks. There's a whole thing about risks. As I mentioned earlier, with the risks, the question they might ask is assess the risk. Assess the risk. We've got data security, we've got driver retention risk, we've got data security control risk. The thing that stood out to me is we rely on a third party to ensure they provide sufficient, right? So we're really reliant on the third party for our cyber security. We're trusting them, we're trusting that third party. So maybe that third party is not good. So even though you're in a cloud, doesn't mean you can't be hacked. So indicates to me cyber security potential question. Competition. We've got competition, direct competition. We've also got substitutes, which is the cars, public transport, etc. So it's a very competitive market. Leads to a put us 5 forces question. Regulation is going to be a big issue because it's very costly. You've got high compliance cost. So if we're going to have safety and environmental, so again, they mention environment. There's lots of mentions of the word environment in this case, indicating need for more transparency, CSR, integrated reporting. If you want to really get ahead of that going forward, right? So maybe put those systems in place now of transparency so that if there is regulation, it's not going to be an issue. They mention environment again. By sustainability, there's also an ethical code of conduct. And ethics is not mentioned anywhere in the case, but they make a big thing of it here. So it indicates to me there could be an ethical question. Remember, they like questions about ethics, some ethical decision in the case in relation to the... it'll be something in the post scene. Something will come in the post scene, which is normally it's an ethical dilemma about whether you should do something or not do something. So ethics mentioned very specifically in the case, safety of drivers, highest standards. So normally when they say that, highest ethical and professional standards, there'll be something in the post scene which is that they don't comply, or there's a situation where you might not comply with the highest standards and you've got to advise the board on ethics. It's quite a popular question in previous exams. So there is training for the drivers, annual safety. There is some kind of support for the drivers. There is some emphasis on customer safety currently. Again, information is important in this case. I've just put here, there's no information or follow-up on low-rated drivers. What are they doing with these low-rated drivers? So you want to keep the good drivers, but what about the bad drivers? What action are you going to take for the bad drivers? Again, committed to the environment. They want to encourage more shared rides and more mobile. So again, could be a nice marketing strategy question. How do we encourage, what marketing strategies can we use to encourage people to use more shared rides and micro mobility? We've launched in-app. So they mentioned something about electronic, right? In-app feature which customers are able to request electronic cards. So again, I said something about there's lots of issues with taxi drivers using electronic cars. It's got a lot of positives, but it's got a lot of negatives as well. Maybe for the driver, operationally, it's going to have some issues for the driver. So there could be an issue about for if they said with all taxi drivers all would need electronic cars. How would that impact the business? What would the impact of the business be of that? Basically, it's growing. Everything's growing. Everything's good. Ride hailing is kind of stable. The ride sharing is declining. The micro is growing, which is good. And the business service is not really that popular at all. So how do we market the business services? How do we get more people? It could be something very different. What are the marketing strategies? Our marketing strategy is currently targeted towards B2C, business to consumer, but how do we get more business customers? What are the business marketing strategies to improve our business services business? So again, something that you need to think about, right? That you think it's going to be about the app, but maybe they ask you something totally left field. What are the marketing strategies? B2B. What are the B2B marketing strategies we could use? Basically, customers are more unhappy. We're doing better than the market, but there's basically been a decline in customer satisfaction in general, and there's a massive decline in driver satisfaction, which is a major risk for the organization. Okay, so how do we deal with that? What action can we take to improve driver satisfaction? I'm going to look at some of the questions now that people have typed in. Okay, so let me just stop presenting. So I've listened to your podcast, went through the other videos. Uber's got to pay heavy penalties for taxi drivers as opposed to Uber on the... So my question is, how should we deal with taxi drivers in an ethical way? How should we deal with taxi drivers in an ethical way? Is there any information on taxi drivers opposing Beago? There's not, but it's... Again, there's going to be 90% of the information you're going to use to answer your case is going to be in the post-scene information. So we can't compensate taxi drivers. That would be a crazy thing to do. But we've got to, look at how we build our own business, right? How we build our own business. And what are the ethical decisions we make? If you listen to my podcast, like Uber is like quite unethical in what they did, right? Their really ethics is very, very low. So, again, we might get information in the post scene in relation to that, in relation to those ethical issues, right? So that's what I talked about in the podcast. So, it lends itself to a nice question on ethical dilemma. Please explain about product management. I don't understand your question. Can you explain what do you mean by product management? I don't know. Yes. Assess the risk, recommend controls. Yeah. I can't share the document, but it will be available online. Give us examples of factors which will lead to delisting of Beago. Look it up on Google. I don't know. Delisting, I don't know. Why would they delist Beago? I mean, take it to private, or they get kicked out of the stock market. Can you explain what you mean, Dav? I don't understand. What kind of recommendations are expected by the examiner? Direct. Yeah, so make sure when you ask for recommendation, don't just go, I think we need to do more research. They want a very direct, clear recommendation. Do not be indirect. Be very, very clear and justify your recommendations. Any technical articles? Nothing specifically on the preseen, but like technical articles do come up in the exam, but there's like a lot of them. There's recent technical articles are in relation to technology and project management. They're the most recent ones that have come up. Definitely it's worth a look at the project management one, Ryan, and there's some about technology, which kind of ties into our AI, big data. So they're the kind of most recent ones. There's about 25 technical articles there, but they're the most recent ones. So there's project management did come in the last exam. COSO framework is a statement, not a question. So I don't understand what you mean by it shouldn't have a question mark because it's not a question. Okay, please don't ask me, can this come up? Because the answer is yes. COSO framework, yes. Partnership, yes. It could come up in the exam. They're already in partnerships already in this company. They already got a partnership with the car rental business. So they're already doing partnerships. Yep. That's a statement, not a question, Diana. Franchising. Again, what is your question, Minkali? I don't understand what your question is. Diana, that's a statement, not a question. Hi, sir. Is there a way to answer unethical issues like what question? Employees will be worried about their salary. Yeah, it could be. There'll be something in the post scene that's very clear, Eureka. There'll be a clear ethical situation described. They won't ask you to base it on the pre-scene. They'll tell you something very specific, new information in the post scene. Okay, what it means is about the, in lots of countries, in cities, it's very expensive to own a car because it's very expensive to park if you live in New York or London and the center. So a lot of people, they decide that actually I don't need to own a car, I'll just use the Uber all the time. So that's why governments say actually it's good because if people are using Uber, they're not driving their own car around. So it's just like a trend in the market. My question is it an opportunity or a threat? It's kind of an opportunity because if more people don't own their own car, basically more people will be using the services. So it's an opportunity. Possible question on franchising. What do you think my answer is going to be? Everybody tell me, if somebody's asking, is there a possible question on franchising? What's my answer going to be? Answer is going to be yes. Why? Because anything is possible. But franchising did come in the last exam, just to let you know. It did come in the last exam. It is possible. Mock exams, you mean mock exams from ACCA? I think they won't repeat them very much. The best mock exam is to buy my mock exam, which is based on the pre-scene, which is a unique question which nobody has ever seen. Okay. Cloud computing is a risk because they're relying on the cloud provider for their security. It says in the case, there's a line in the case which says, we assume that the cloud provider is using very good security. They assume. So when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. So there could be a situation where they're relying on the cloud provider for security, but the security is crap. and they're subject to a cyber attack. Okay. So cloud computing, has got a lot of good points, but there's also a loss. There's also a loss of control. Okay. Nicholas, Beago growth, registered active users, 14 years. Registered active customers are for 14 years, but only was established 12 years ago. I think, maybe it's just like, I won't read too much into that. I don't think it's massive, Nicholas. It's probably, they talked about growth, right? Because they did talk about they're going to grow. I don't think it's significant. In Dubai, we use a camera inside the car. Yeah, it could be that, right? It could be issues about ethical issues. I think it says in the case they are using cameras. So, or something they might, yeah, that's a good one, right? Cameras inside the car. Should we put cameras inside the car? What is the privacy issue, ethical issue? Is it fair? Is it good for the customers? Is it protection? So yeah, that's a good one, Dove. Okay, any more questions? Why do you think the driver's dissatisfied? Because it tells us in the case, Diana. There's a big thing about driver dissatisfaction, driver satisfaction going down, right? Going down. There's an increase in driver dissatisfaction. It's going down. So it actually tells you in the case. Drivers are unhappy because, again, listen to my podcast. You'll see why drivers are unhappy. Right? Basically, it's difficult to make money. And you've got no, like, if you're in America driving an Uber, you've got no insurance. You've got no holiday pay. It's like for a proper job, you get insurance and holiday pay. You don't have anything. So it's quite tough to make money. It's a tough job, It's a tough job. Thank you, Sanjay. Customer satisfaction is falling as well, Diana. It shows you in the case that the Net Promoter Score is an indication of customer satisfaction. That is generally falling as well. So there's issues. We don't know what they are. They may be mentioned in the post scene. Why are customers unhappy? Why are drivers unhappy? They may give you more information in the post scene. It's stated in the case. Right now, Diana, I have given you 2 free podcasts. If you like and subscribe, there may be another one. If you are lucky, you may get another one next week on Uber. So there could be another one. I'm planning a 3rd one, but it depends. I'm just in the middle of marking. I've got lots of students now who are sitting the mock exam based on the preseen this weekend. So due to popular demand, I had to reopen it. So if you can sit the mock exam on Tuesday or Wednesday, it's still available, but you need to book by Monday. There's lots of environmental and sustainability issues mentioned in the preseen. Just look for the word environment and you can see them. It's mentioned a lot of times. The word environment and sustainability is mentioned a lot. Do some work, look at it, look at the preseen, you'll see lots of mention of it. Okay, anybody got any last minute questions before we close it down? The Net Promoter Score is for the industry. It's dropping for the industry as a whole. It's got nothing to do with competition. It's dropping for the industry as a whole, Nicholas. It's dropping in general. So competition's not a factor that caused it. Okay, I'm gonna close it down. You'll be able to find this on YouTube. There's lots of interesting things on YouTube there, and you can find them. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. Driver unhappy, probably in the post scene, it will tell you. It will tell you why drivers are unhappy. Normally they're unhappy because they're not getting paid enough, not got enough business, not got enough work, not got enough holiday pay, not being motivated or incentivized. Please subscribe, please like and subscribe, and watch out for the podcast coming in, maybe in the middle of next week. After I've finished marking many scripts, I'll be doing the podcast. Thanks, Sanja. Yeah, could be. Anything's possible, Nicholas, as we always said. Okay. I'm just gonna